Well, hey, welcome to Edge of Wonder with your hosts, Ben and Rob. Did you know that the CIA used art to spread international propaganda during the Cold War? Huh, imagine that. And they figured out how to secretly prevent any opposition.
Yeah, and from ancient times to today, certain groups have influenced entire cultural landscapes. That's had both positive and negative results.
Why did Michelangelo hide from his commissioners, the Medici family, in an underground bunker?
Is modern art just a modern hoax? So join us on this Edge of Wonder for a breakdown on the art of war, quote unquote, and subterfuge. So we'll see you guys out
On the edge. Ben, I like how you mouthed the music there, right? As like right before she did that.
Yeah, thank you.
We hear that too many times a week, it seems.
So true. So true.
Well, hey, are you guys listening to the Edge of Wonder podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or elsewhere? Please leave us a 5-star rating and review. It's going to help us reach a lot more people. And also, remember, if you're on YouTube or wherever, Rumble, Ganjing World, Twitter, anywhere, just remember to like and subscribe. Follow us, basically, so that we can keep reaching out to you with our content, our fascinating content, like today's conversation, which is all going to revolve around art.
Yeah, it's a massive rabbit hole.
Huge.
You know, it's one of those topics that we've always wanted to do a really in-depth episode on. And we talked about it in a couple different live shows and even some conferences that we spoke at, but we haven't really had like a full show completely dedicated.
I kind of feel like when we know a lot about something, we'll hold off until we have the means to do it really well, because
it's true.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because this is such like a massive rabbit hole with art.
Well, yeah, and this is actually a really good example. It's like, just to kind of start this whole conversation off, like a few things on Picasso here. Why don't we watch this Instagram video first, and then there's an article too. Look at this.
Can you guys tell me if I'm crazy, please? So this is a Picasso that just recently sold for $120 million. So I'm watching the auction on TikTok, the Sotheby's auction on TikTok, and I couldn't be more disgusted. There was 5 or 6 people bidding on this past $100 million. There's kids all around the world whose ribs are touching, and you're just going to hang this in the foyer for 120 mil. I mean, Picasso pulled a fast one on all of us. Jiminy Crickets. He was just like, okay, cat paw. All right, villain from the Mask of Zorro, and then we'll do an olive, and then put a sombrero. Come on, 120 million? I can draw toes like that. Who can't draw toes like that? All right, Anthony, that's a hand, because the watch, no one's wearing a watch on their ankles. Anyways, the world we live in is absolutely disgusting because of shit like that. I don't care. These people worked hard for their money. Come on. I mean, at what point? 120 million for this? There's a family of 17 out there somewhere in the world with no roof, just getting rained on, and some rich asshole's taking a dump in his master bathroom with this hanging up behind him. What world are we living in?
Oh, that's great, man.
Tell me if I'm crazy, please. So this is a Picasso.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
All right. That was a review on the Picasso painting like only someone in Boston could give.
That's crazy.
Thank you. What's his name?
Dollars.
Anthony. Nobody cares, Anthony. Okay, he's great. Well, anyway, so following up with that,
yeah,
so this Pablo Picasso painting that depicts his mistress is expected to sell for 120. It sold for even more than that, right? Because he was just saying it was like 140, right?
It was painted in 1932.
Oh, what? It did go for 120?
It sold for more than $139 million at auction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn, that's insane. That is totally insane. Did it say who bought it? That's what I was trying to look into.
Did it reveal who purchased it? We're looking for it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I don't think it. And man, that is nuts though. I just can't even get over that. And okay, like we're gonna start talking about like Michelangelo here in a minute, but like
the stuff that he said was still cracking me up.
it's insane. And okay, like some people are like, well, this is expressionism, and you have like Picasso and you have Van Gogh that kind of create a similar style, right? But especially in like today's world, where everything is just so chaotic and crazy. And I was actually having a conversation about even architecture with somebody, because we actually got into a modern art conversation a couple days ago. I did with somebody, but art was supposed to inspire like a divine feeling. So when you see art, it really uplifts you, and it brings this sense of like wonder, but really as just a sense of like like just resonating with God, and bring you closer to that feeling. And this stuff, it's the exact opposite, and like then you start thinking about like what are people's thoughts when they create these kinds of things. And that's to me, that's like a really big issue. So I mean, because like when you're really creating something, especially like something like a statue or a really intricate painting, and if your thoughts just kind of wander off or leave a little bit or whatever, like you'll just mess up pretty easily. And
For sure.
this is just like a big mess up. It's just like whatever.
The whole thing was a mess to begin with. Yeah. Well, and yeah, and I think it's pretty easy to kind of explain this, but if you ask anyone out there, majority of people, okay, if you ask the majority of people out there what the height of our civilization's art was,
Yeah,
every single one of them will say what?
the Renaissance era.
They'll say the Renaissance. Now, what's the defining factor of the Renaissance?
Or like Roman times as well. There was some really amazing stuff.
But of our civilization, that wasn't really our civilization, right? Like that was the
that's true though. It's not. Yeah, our civilization, you're right.
Our civilization, you'd say the Renaissance, and it's like, what is the defining factor of the Renaissance? It was when man coupled his artistic abilities with his spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
It was at the height of those two things that forced the art to go up to the level that it had gotten to. And so now you can see the more it strays from that, the further away you've gotten from the spiritual man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And like, I know like,
that has always been one of my top creepy portraits. The one that you just pulled up. I forget who this.
That's Van
it's
Eyck.
Hans.
Oh, yeah.
Van
They
Eyck.
look like aliens.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like the guy on the left is like, he just looks like something out of a nightmare now, but probably back then he would have looked like a really rich guy.
A hat man.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like Hat Man's grandpappy. Like nobody has a bigger hat than that guy. This is like
funny.
Mega Hat Man.
Mega Hat Man. Yeah. Well, and the other aspect, so like Van Gogh, Starry, I used to love Starry Night when I was younger. I even had that painting in my room for a while, and
a lot of people did.
The funny thing is it broke too.
That's probably for a reason.
Yeah, and like, and I even had a friend who was an artist, and she really had a hard time with it, and I was always giving her a hard time, but then like as I got older and started understanding these things in a deeper context, you start looking at this and it's like, yeah, okay, this is one of the more famous paintings, in modern era, but it's like in reality, what is it really depicting? And it's like this.
Well, I can tell you.
Uh-huh.
Van Gogh was really high on absinthe, a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're right. It's like, what was it depicting? It's like, he's just going with his emotions, his feelings, and he's just getting it all down. But
and there's this like tower looking thing that looks like this hellish tower,
front, it's like a tree or something.
Not that the one, the tree or tower, whatever that is. I always thought of it as a tower. And And again, like if you're having like weird, if you're like being really weird and having weird thoughts and doing a bunch of drugs or something like that, you're not going to see, you're just going to be painting these like dark things. But if you're like meditating or, you know, praying, meditating, whatever it is, and trying to align yourself with more of a righteous field, you're going to have like more, you want to create something beautiful where people see it and they're like, wow, you know, like really inspiring mankind to do something amazing.
The works that are being sold for the most money, not all of them, like some Leonardo's still go for a lot, okay, but a lot of the works that are being sold for the most money right now that are in, you know, like abstract expressionism and stuff, the defining factor of these artists is like most of the time psychological issues or clinical depression. Like serious. Like Picasso, I mean, he was a madman. People around him didn't like him. His son killed himself. Salvador Dali, like that guy was out of his bloody mind. And you know, these paintings that they're doing, which are just like, it's like reality melting, basically. These are what people are spending a lot of money on now. But what I think is really interesting, and we'll be getting into this soon, is that we could easily make the case that everybody's understanding of art right now has been, it is a complete psychological operation that the CIA heavily influenced. And we'll get into that soon. But before we do, there's something really interesting that we want to talk about, which is Michelangelo basically going into hiding for, I think it was months and months, right? It was 10 months. Now, recently, this secret room where Michelangelo hid was found, I guess, right? And they're actually going to allow people to tour this room. I think they only allow like 4 people, like I think it's only like 10 people per week, isn't it? Something like this.
Really?
Yeah. So the story goes that Michelangelo fell out of favor with Pope Clement the 7th and took refuge in Sagrestia Nuova. That novel mausoleum of Michelangelo's own design is one of several chapels enclosed within Florence's famed domed Piazza di Madonna degli Aldobrandini. Aldobrandini is one of the big names, by the way.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like, we know the 13 families, and that is like,
yeah, that's like
above the 13 families.
Yeah. So in a vault with nothing but time on his hands, the artist took to beautifying the plain walls using some pieces of charcoal. Okay, so basically, this guy is in solitary confinement for like 10 months straight. Dude can't even leave because he fell out of favor with the Medicis, and actually, I think even went against him. So basically, the story kind of goes that the Medici family was overthrown in Florence, ousting them from the town in 1527. And okay, the Medicis are another one of these big families. Like among the big families are like these Aldobrandinis, these Medicis, right? So Michelangelo had relied on them for most of his money because they were the ones that were, you know, asking him to paint all of the stuff and do sculptures and stuff. And they were patrons of most of the art at that time, but Michelangelo also helped to defy them. And the Medicis were only out of power for 10 months. So only for 10 months were they out of power. Then Pope Clement VII, who was a Medici himself, won back the city, and sympathizers of the revolt were punished. Michelangelo had to hide. And Michelangelo's secret room, get this, Ben, it was just 9.8 feet wide and 32.8 feet long and 8.2 feet high. So we're talking about a very slender, long room.
Yeah, it's like basically like a small bedroom.
Yeah, like, well, a large bedroom in that it would be like the length of your house, but like 9 feet wide.
Oh, 32 feet long. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, about 10 feet wide and 32 feet long. Okay,
Right.
okay, you're right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with
10 months.
for 10 months he's in there. So
Wow.
while he's in there, he's got some charcoal and he starts putting studies of figures, limbs, and heads, covering the walls with this stuff. And one of the things that he has in there is Laocoon, which was the Trojan priest of Greek mythology, who writhes in agony as he's killed by serpents. This was one of the drawings that he he had in there. When the Medicis forgave him, Michelangelo emerged. They had him finish their mausoleum. The secret room remained hidden until, look at this. This room remained hidden until 1975, when tests were performed on the walls during cleaning. Now, since 1975, there's been like zero discussion about this, essentially. But soon tours will begin, and there's a limit of 4 people per visit with a maximum. Okay, here it is, a maximum of 100 per week. So they only have 100 people per week looking at this, and the drawings need extended periods of darkness between periods of LED light exposure. So if there's too much LED light exposure, the drawings are going to go haywire.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, do you know too much about, Michelangelo during that time?
I mean, a little bit, not a whole lot. But what's really interesting is that the Metropolitan Museum of Art had a very special exhibition a couple years ago on Michelangelo, and they had artworks that were more rare, and like drawings and everything else. And it's interesting because now, like, all this stuff is kind of coming out about Michelangelo. Like, they thought, like, for example, they think he's gay or whatever, and all these, it's like, and I feel like
they're Leonardo, they say about that.
Yeah. And I feel like they're trying to bring him down, in a certain way because, I mean, in a matter of speaking, what he was doing is almost like super normal. I mean, you could say like his most amazing paintings, I'm sure he had visions of this stuff or dreams, and it's just like, I'm going to paint exactly what I experienced, So, and like reading about him and understanding him, he just wasn't, I don't know, like not like normal of what we think, I mean, I would almost a sense of,
he was like the definition of prolific.
Yeah,
how much he did, and I mean,
and the things he
also
talked
how
about.
much he knew.
Yeah, and what he knew,
dude. Like, if you go into if you look at the Sistine Chapel and everything that's painted in the Sistine Chapel and all of the history that he managed to stuff in with these heavenly paintings, you're like, bro, like, it's out of control,
completely. And when you read some of his writings too, it really sounds like he was like cultivating himself, like to become like a very spiritual person or very religious person. And, so it really is pretty amazing. And it makes me kind of sad that history now is trying to, say all these things about him, and not to say that I'm not trying to criticize him and, like it's like saying anything against gay people or anything, but it's like, you can't just assume that somebody is gay because they paint a naked male person.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like with what they're trying to do with him. But
well, also, like, people, it's sort of the same old thing. It's like, we have no way of understanding where people's minds were at a few hundred years ago when we're not there at the time experiencing that kind of culture. You know what I mean? It's like, even the further you go back, the less probably able you're going to be to understand their mindset unless you're actually there. And this is one of the problems I have with historians and scientists claiming things about what people meant by things that they, like artwork or different things. You know what I mean? Of course, some things are obvious, right? Like, I think in Pompeii, for instance, like, Pompeii is a very interesting place just because, like, there was evidence in Pompeii of like the worst kind of human debauchery up everywhere. There's those like painting of phalluses everywhere. There's brothels everywhere. And like there were even people going around and drawing symbols, basically saying like God is going to destroy all of this, like in Pompeii.
Yeah.
And, you know, then it did. Then it happened. Within a couple of minutes, gone. Like everyone was gone in a couple of minutes. You know, it was the wrath of, you know, something higher than of course anything I understand. But
Right.
but yeah, I think it's, you know, the human body was created by divinity. And so what better way to I think honor God's creation than to learn how to draw it and depict it beautifully and then give back using that, right? And this is where the artists were at.
Right,
You know,
right. And
their
it's
heads
like,
weren't even on like, what am I? You know, what like they weren't even
right.
like they didn't even, it was just, I mean, imagine how much work they were doing. You know, they were just in their zones all the time, like the entire time. You know, aside, like,
Right.
of course, you know, you get these, like Botticelli was obsessed with, you know, that woman. I can't remember her name right now.
I can't think of her name either.
Anyway, and then Michelangelo had the Mona Lisa. Like, obviously, these guys got carried away with the
Or
female figure.
Leonardo had Mona Lisa, you mean?
Yeah, Leonardo. I was talking about Leonardo.
Yeah,
so but this painting is of Venus, but it was the same woman that he was painting over and over again. Like Botticelli fell in love, like just head over heels over this one woman in this area, and every woman he would make look like her because she was like the perfect woman in his eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so were the other artists at the time. They were all drawing this particular woman.
Yeah, she was very famous.
All right, we need to show a trailer, which is going to get into our Ghent altarpiece for our Relics of Power series. And all of this you guys can find on our rise.tv site. So Lindsay, you want to show this? Oh, that was shorter.
Yeah.
Did you guys know that was actually Rob painting? The hands you saw there, that was Rob.
Oh yeah,
he was a painter, so we got him to film it.
Yeah, that wasn't Leonardo or Jan van Eyck or anyone. The Ghent altarpiece episode's really interesting. Jan van Eyck was a very, very fascinating person who seemed to hide a lot of things in his paintings. Like he was one of these genius guys that was so beyond like even the learning of painting that he started to hide symbolism in his painting, and he was communicating through his paintings with other people. And at the time there was this whole like lore going around, I guess you could say, about the Holy Grail and finding the Holy Grail. And this Ghent altarpiece painting was said to have a map to the Holy Grail in it, and it's missing to this day, which just makes it even crazier. Like, why is it still missing? It got stolen. Like his paintings are getting stolen over and over again because people are convinced that there is something in there that can lead them to something of divinity. Very interesting. I highly recommend you watch that Relics of Power series if you haven't.
Yeah, it's more of a documentary too.
It is.
Like how we filmed it was more of a documentary than like a typical Edge of Wonder episode. So yeah. And before we jump to the next topic, you know, you were talking about how they were creating the image of, or like man of
image of divine. God.
Yeah. And, you know, it made me think of like the Leonardo's portrait of the male or the man, the human figure.
The Vitruvian Man, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to think of the name of it. Yeah, Vitruvian. Yeah. Yes.
You can also call him the Anatomical Man, but he's the Vitruvian Man because he based it off of Vitruvius's initial drawing.
All right. Yeah, and what Lindsay's showing right now is all of our series that we did for the Relics of Power. I forget how many episodes are there, but there's a lot.
9 episodes. It's a lot.
Yeah. A lot to watch.
Yeah.
All right. Should we jump into the CIA?
Yeah. I honestly, after this, you guys are you're not going to think about art the same, I don't think.
Well, yeah. And the other aspect is how the modern art scene has been just hijacked by organizations, companies, the elites, like everything, as a really as a way for money, like legal money laundering. And then of course, like we have the CIA was using this as a weapon. And yeah, I mean, it's just so much going on with the modern art world, and it's actually really sad how it just, oh God, this just makes my head hurt.
It's true.
Is
Like
this
everything
Pollock?
Ben's,
Yeah.
everything Ben's talking about, like with where it is right now, like where the art scene is now and how it's being used for like money laundering, all of that stuff. It kind of all started here.
Yeah,
which
that
is,
yeah, it did actually.
right, which is the fact that this is a confirmed fact that the Central Intelligence Agency used American modern art, including the works of such artists as like Jackson Pollock,
Which we just saw.
Robert Motherwell, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko, right, as a weapon in the Cold War. So the CIA fostered and promoted American abstract expressionist painting around the world for more than 20 years. Now, you're like, why is the CIA getting involved in this, right? Well, there was this period in the 1950s and the 1960s when the great majority of Americans disliked or even despised modern art. President Truman even summed up the popular view when he said, "If that's art, then I'm a Hottentot."
That's
okay.
funny.
So as for the artists themselves, many were ex-communists, barely acceptable in the America of the, McCarthyite era, and certainly not the sort of people normally likely to receive U.S. government backing. That's important to understand, is that a lot of them were ex-communists. The Americans were not cool with communists, and yet now they start pushing a lot of this stuff. So what was going on, right? So the new American art was secretly promoted under a policy known as the long leash, arrangement similar in some ways to the indirect CIA backing of the journal encounter edited by Steven Spender, which we don't have too much time to get into here today. But now here's kind of the core, okay, of this entire thing. Dismayed at the appeal communism still had for many intellectuals and artists in the West, the new agency set up a division, the Propaganda Assets Inventory. That's the name of the division, which at its peak could influence more than 800 newspapers, magazines, and public information organizations. Y'all, this was Project Mockingbird before Project Mockingbird.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. They joked that it was like a Wurlitzer jukebox. When the CIA pushed a button, it could hear whatever tune it wanted playing across the world. That's scary. So in 1950, the International Organizations Division, the IOD, was set up. This office subsidized and sponsored American jazz artists, opera recitals, etc. CIA is doing this, guys. Its agents were placed in the film industry, publishing houses, even as travel writers, and also promoted America's anarchaic avant-garde movement, abstract expressionism. Okay. In 1947, the State Department organized and paid for a touring international exhibition called Advancing American Art. The show caused outrage at home, prompting Truman's remark that we shared earlier. One congressman said, "I am just a dumb American who pays taxes for this kind of trash." The tour had to be canceled. This prevented the U.S. government from consolidating the shift in cultural supremacy from Paris to New York since the 1930s. To resolve the dilemma, the CIA was brought in. Yep. So because, just to kind of sum this up, because this stuff was having a hard time spreading around, because we're all rejecting it because it's ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah.
The CIA actually had to step in because the goal was to bring the cultural art scene from Paris to America. They're trying to figure out a way to get it over here. Okay. So
and
go ahead,
and so then it's like, well, how would you do this, right? So that's why the auctions started getting really important, because you couldn't just have crap art that, you know, all of a sudden you just like, people just won't accept it, right? So you start having very elite members of society, especially the Rockefellers came through at that time. And then what happens is that you take like an art, like any one of the artists that Rob mentioned, right? And then you start having auctions. Realistically, probably wouldn't even sell for $25 at a garage sale. And then what you do is you had like one of the Rockefellers, and this is honest to God, true story, come in and start bidding for like $10 million all of a sudden. Well, if a Rockefeller buys something for $10 million, now all of a sudden that artist is now like a multi-million-dollar famous artist. And then everybody wants it. It's like, oh my gosh, you know, David Rockefeller bought this. I want to buy it too. I want to buy one of his stuff. He must be like important or big, or this must be really good, you know? And it's like, if you have to explain to somebody why art is good, is it really good?
Yeah, it's the art of BSing is what it is.
It really is.
And that's what's so funny is they call it a BS artist. Like,
yeah,
you know, I don't want to say the word, but it's true.
And look, I mean, okay, like, you know, and this is, I mean, okay, I'm just relaying facts here. This is what happened recently with Hunter Biden. He was creating art and then selling it to these other countries for like $500,000. And in reality, it's just legal money laundering. It's like, oh, hey, I actually owe $1 million in taxes. This art piece is worth $1 million. How about I just give this to you instead of paying taxes? And it's like, there's a major loophole in the system. And aside from that, if you bought a piece overseas and you didn't import it, you don't have to take, you don't have to pay, you don't have to pay the import tax. So there's these gigantic warehouses in places like Switzerland having the most pristine artwork kept inside of it that are just there specifically for tax purposes, and they're never really going to see a light of day, and they're owned by like these big, you know, names and everything else. And so it's become a legal money laundering, and there's actually major tax breaks in art. So
yeah,
there was a video. This guy, it's called Adam Ruins Everything. And he just talks about all kinds of crazy things. And he was on TV and with his show, but he did one on art, the modern art scene. And it was actually really good how he broke it down. And he went into the auction houses and how like breaking down all the auction. And this was on like, you know, primetime television. So yeah, I was kind of surprised that they let him like go that deep. And he even like mentioned, you know, who was buying this art and everything else. So it was a pretty interesting video. Yeah, this is it right there. How the fine art market is a scam.
It is. It really
100% it's a scam. And you know, it's
some people call it a religion. Like it's that crazy. Gotten that crazy. Like they'll sell a really crappy piece of art, and if someone comes in who they don't want to have the piece of art, they'll reject them for a person who is going to make the art appear like it's more valuable. So like if like Ewan McGregor came in and said he wanted to buy a piece of art and they're like, oh, he's out right now, we don't want him to have this piece, they'll reject him, and they'll get like somebody like Khloe Kardashian as a, you know, bad example to like own the art piece, like if they're interested, you know.
And they'll change the price too based on who you are.
For sure.
That's the other thing.
You mentioned Khloe Kardashian because there's an episode of The Kardashians where they trick their mom into thinking that their crappy garage painting is like this awesome modern art piece. And that was one of the plots in their episodes. And Khloe is the one who painted it, I think.
That's funny.
That's so funny.
All right. Well, let's keep going through this a little bit because it's pretty interesting. So the new CIA agency was staffed with Yale and Harvard grads, many of whom collected art and wrote novels. It was a haven of liberalism when compared with a political world dominated by McCarthy or with J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. If any official institution was in a position to celebrate the collection of Leninists, Trotskyites, and heavy drinkers that make up the New York school, it was the CIA. This was a quote, what I just read. So it was recognized that abstract expressionism was the kind of art that made socialist realism look even more stylized and more rigid and confined than it was. And that relationship was exploited in some of the exhibitions. So basically, what they're doing is they're noticing that like all of the like propaganda pieces that are over there in communist Russia, wherever, they're showing like how free the American art is and then making fun of them for being so stodgy. So they're actually using this abstract expressionism to kind of like fool everyone into thinking that like America is more free and therefore they can do more free things with their art. And this is why, you know, you should sign on with America instead of some of these communist nations, right? So it was recognized that abstract expressionism was the kind of art that made socialist realism look even more stylized, like I said. In a way, so this is a quote, in a way, our understanding was helped because Moscow in those days was very vicious in its denunciation of any kind of nonconformity to its own very rigid patterns. And so one could quite adequately and accurately reason that anything they criticized that much and that heavily handed was worth supporting one way or another, which is how they started gaining support for this abstract expressionism. The CIA didn't care if it used communist-leaning artists and thinkers to promote their cause, showing that America was the cultural height of the world and that the Soviets were bad. The artists didn't even have to know they were being used. This was the long leash that they were using.
Yeah, and unfortunately, because of this, so many other countries have now been influenced by American art, especially South Korea. South Korea, the modern art scene in South Korea is so massive. There's like these gigantic museums everywhere that are totally devoted only to modern art.
Well, and they're right next to Japan too.
Yeah, yeah. And then when you think about like in France, like how much amazing artwork came out of France, and now it's like also it's becoming this like modern art, you know, kind of. I mean, of course, you got the Louvre and like some really great places that still have art, but it's like the modern art scene. It's like they've really like grabbed hold of it in these like specific areas now, and you know, like the Museum of Modern Art in New York is just crazy. I don't know if you guys have been there, but it's pretty insane. So, okay, why don't you want to keep going, Rob?
Sure. Yeah, we're almost finished with this part. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was the CIA's campaign centerpiece. It was set up in 1950. It had offices in 35 countries and published more than 24 magazines. The Congress for Cultural Freedom was the ideal front to promote abstract expressionism. It was the official sponsor of touring exhibitions, and its magazines would provide useful platforms for critics favorable to the new American art. No one, the artists included, would be any wiser, okay? Mm-hmm. One of the most significant exhibitions visited every big European city from 1958 to 1959. Other exhibitions traveled too. Millionaires and museums were called into play as well. So this whole thing with the abstract expressionism is a massive CIA. It has been a massive CIA operation since the 50s.
Yeah, and you know, so when both of us were working in the media, I was doing a lot of the humanitarian stuff. Like we were just interviewing people in New York and whatnot. And sure. I won't say who directly, but I actually went to one of the Rockefellers' personal home. It was their apartment, and it was in New York. Really, really nice apartment. And I couldn't believe that we were, invited. And this was like before, way before we were doing Edge of Wonder or anything else. And they had this massive Picasso painting hung up, and I was thinking it was a replica, because it's just like you see a Picasso painting, you don't think that that's the original, right?
Yeah.
So then it wasn't until it just kind of hit me later, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is an original Picasso. This is literally worth millions and millions of dollars, and it was big. But it's like, when you think about it, you're like, why would you pay millions of dollars and like hang it up in your living room? That's like so massively big, But yeah. So anyway, so that's exactly it, And then other people were like, well, I want a Picasso hanging up in my living room, So it really influences things. And I'm not trying to say there's a connection here, but we just know that this is what they're doing and how
there is a connection. It's like if the rich and famous and the quote unquote cultural elite are engaging in a certain type of culture, other people will follow. That's just how human beings are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So when you're an influencer, when you're an elite person, you have a certain amount of responsibility in what you do because it will influence other people.
Yeah. And
they recognize that or not, it's true.
Right. Well, that's it. And it's interesting because when I was there, I was actually taking photos, and so, it didn't strike me at first until I really started thinking about it. And I was just like, man, I don't know. It's just the energy of these things, and then you have it hanging in your home, and it's like, what kind of energy do you really want to bring in your home? And if you have like really beautiful art pieces or things that inspire you, that's good. But then if you're surrounded by all this like stuff, then it's like, what is that bringing into your field, your field of your home and the field of your even your body,
Yeah.
So
and this one time when I was in Manhattan, I had to go to the Four Seasons restaurant to do something. And I go to the Four Seasons restaurant, and I met with one of the owners, or like not the owners, the guy who runs it, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like walking through the lobby, to get in there. And I look over and I'm like, there's massive painting on the wall. And he's like, hey, you see that? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's Picasso. And I was like, really? And he was like, yeah. And he was like, we've had this for X amount of years and blah, blah, blah. Because like Four Seasons is like one of the nicer
right.
restaurants. Or it was. It has been for a really long time. I think its kind of fame has dwindled slightly, but the food there is still,
it's more of the name now. And the hotel, I mean, it's both expensive. The restaurant or the hotel is very expensive.
Right. And it is. It's like, it is true. It's like New York is this weird place where you're like walking down the street and you look through a window and there's like a crazy portrait hanging up there,
Mm-hmm.
But like, I think what's so interesting about this to me is that like the CIA getting involved in the culture. Like, think about it. We often think like, oh, this stuff doesn't matter. Art doesn't really mean anything. We're talking about agencies who have been ahead of these things for a really long time, have seen the importance of them, and then used them to conduct a lot of psychological operations that have made life the way that it is. I mean, that one quote in here was really disturbing, where it said like, they joked that it was like a Wurlitzer jukebox. When the CIA pushed a button, it could hear whatever tune it wanted playing across the world. Like, that implications of that line, like, this is how they had propaganda assets. This propaganda assets inventory at its peak could influence more than 800 newspapers, magazines, and public information organizations. Like, this is what our intelligence agencies do. So when people or a large group of people are all thinking something, oftentimes it's been tampered with by actual operations that are very easy for them to conduct.
Mm-hmm.
And this is like, this is PR. Like, this is PR. Like, our American society is so in the dark and naive about public relations, propaganda, and what our intelligence agencies operations have run that it's astounding. They don't even know where their current concepts about things come from, and they're all talking about things so absolutely like they have an opinion, and like they weren't handed that opinion. Like they were handed that opinion by someone and they took it, but they think it's theirs.
Yeah. It's it's insane. It really is. And just how it all breaks down. And I think there's multiple elements to it as well. On top, like one, just like, okay, well, why, like some people might think, what's the main reason? Like, why would they do this? And I think, like, to answer that, they've been trying to. It's like it's exactly communism, right? It's like you want to destroy people's faith in God. And so how do you do that? You can start with the arts, and you can very easily brainwash people, influence a whole society on the arts alone. And you think about movies, music, art, it's all the same. So we're just focusing on the art, but I mean, they did the same thing with, like, you could say even movies and
well, this is a precursor to Project Mockingbird too.
Yeah, you're right.
They're putting people in place in different areas to influence thinking, to influence large groups of people and their opinions and their thinking in order to obtain a certain outcome. It is the definition of nefarious.
Yeah.
But we've got to hold that thought.
Well,
we've got to watch the trailer, and then as soon as we get back, I want to hear. I really want to hear what you're going to say.
Okay,
go ahead, Lindsay.
War, conquest, death. Most World War II historians will highlight the politics of the time, but gloss over the truth behind Hitler's quest for power. The blood-spattered trail the Nazis smeared across the globe cannot be forgotten even today. But what if details were lost in the aftermath of the manic effort to create a Third Reich? Or what if they were left out of the history books on purpose? What if the Nazis were searching for something else? Particular artifacts Hitler had researched feverishly in his darkest days. Objects so extraordinary, he believed they held the answer to world domination. Objects that had the power to change the course of history itself. These were the relics of power. One relic was most crucial to the Nazis' plans, one that brought together all the relic mysteries, but was a mystery itself, because it was missing and contained a secret map. The Ghent altarpiece.
Well, you guys, again, you can find that over on arise.tv. That was the Ghent altarpiece that we did for the Relics of Power series that we talked about earlier, with 9 different episodes that we have all. And again, we really like put more effort into these, and we even did original recording of like art, like we actually took the pieces and did really like used fog machine, did really like nice presentation of all of them. So of course we didn't have the Ghent altarpiece like in person, but we did.
Maybe we do.
Never know.
Just kidding. Yeah, it's 25 feet long. I definitely can't fit that in here.
Yeah, probably not. But oh yeah, so okay, we were talking about, like, how the CIA influenced art and everything else, and Project Mockingbird. So recently I was in Vegas for this event, and I wanted to check out the Sphere. And you and I we had a whole thing a couple, like maybe a month ago or so, about the Sphere. And so I started asking people in the area too, like, what is there anything really weird that you guys know about? And yes. So when it first opened, I didn't go inside, but when it first opened, it was like showcasing, inside. Like everyone was in there. Well, what was really weird is that they had a bunch of words that were coming up at one point in time. And then when you start breaking down, people were like taking videos of it and pausing the video and finding words that were, I think one of them was Satan, and then like all these weird things inside of it. And so,
no way, really?
Yeah. And so people were like talking about how like this like whole MK Ultra thing related to it then at that point. So, but I don't think I think it was just like, you know, there's so many designs on the outside. Like if you watch it for like 5 minutes, you're going to see, you're not going to see it repeat itself for 5 minutes. You know, it's just constantly different things that are going on within that sphere. But anyway, it's just, so when you think about it in the sense of art, it could be the same concept, right? With modern art, you can put in anything you want. I mean, you could start adding, you know, you could put in these words, and like, think about how many words that, like, I mean, like the obey thing, even, you know, granted, that's more of like kind of like trying to expose things. But I mean, there's certain phrases and words that almost become art in itself in this modern art scene. Or like, you know, the image of Mao. There's that really famous image of Mao that's the modern art Mao, and it's hung up in a lot of pristine Chinese restaurants and things like that.
Yeah, it's like pop culture Mao.
Pop culture Mao.
Yeah. Like, oh, let's just put the guy up who killed like probably 200 million people.
Yeah, and it's like it then it becomes cool.
Like, imagine if people were doing that with Hitler.
Yeah, seriously.
That's how whacked it is. It's like, this guy is like, he's more blood on his hands than Hitler, and y'all's just putting him up in your restaurant. That's wild.
I the way things are going, I almost feel like in like 40 years, that would probably be a normal thing then, like a pulp culture portrait of, in fact, I wouldn't even be surprised if it already exists.
No, I think that would still be really looked down on.
Yeah, I hope
right
so.
now. You know, like,
yeah. Yeah, I would really hope that would be looked down on.
That's one of them. Yeah, you can pull that up. There's like this one kind of like print. It's kind of like
that's the one that's making fun of Mao. But there is like there's actually a real one.
This one, they put makeup on him in this one.
Yeah. This one's making fun of him. But there's one that's it's like the background is red. It's really
basically like this, but not makeup on the dude. Yeah. But anyway, it's fine. You don't have to look for it.
Yeah, it's like the pop culture version of Mao. But
that was an Andy Warhol painting. That one that was just up.
Really?
Yeah, it might be one of the OGs of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what it looks like now, but
well, you know, I don't know if you know this, Ben, but the CIA, for decades, there have been rumors that the CIA's art collection has hidden meaning. Did you know that?
I mean, yeah, I have looked into this a little bit. So yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what I was saying too, but yeah, keep going.
So yeah, the abstract paintings at the agency's Langley headquarters aren't accessible to the public, but photographers are published online, allowing art lovers to make up their own minds about a nagging question. Is the collection part of a CIA propaganda operation, or is it just art? The CIA maintains there's no hidden agenda. Everyday agency employees walk past several abstract paintings that hang throughout the headquarters buildings. These 29 paintings do not just break up the, acres of wall space. They represent an elemental approach to art, a swashbuckling donor, Vincent Melzack, and a connection to the architecture of the original headquarters building. So this is kind of interesting. Oregonian artist Joby Barron stirred up conspiracy theories when the CIA refused to give her any information about the paintings that adorn their walls. However, Barron used the Freedom of Information Act to get the intelligence, and later exhibited her reproductions of the art in a 2015 show called Acres of Walls. Well, listen to this quote. We don't hide our art collection. We're not trying to keep it out of the media, CIA spokesperson Glenn Miller said. It's not classified in any way whatsoever. However, when this artist, Joby Barron, ended up getting the documents from the Freedom of Information Act, tons of it was redacted.
Yeah. And it's like,
So
why?
it's like, what do you
It's just
mean it's
art.
not classified? There is classified stuff in there if you're redacting stuff in any information you have about it, you know?
Oh man. It's like, why would you do that just for art, right? Unless there's some kind of
Yeah,
hidden
and I
agenda.
mean, it's interesting. Like, think about it. You remember a few like months ago, or maybe even a little longer, we were showing this clip of a woman who used to do makeup at the CIA.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah,
she was
yeah, yeah. The
talking about
mask.
how, and like
Yeah,
how
it was more
fast-
masks, not makeup, and
right.
it was really, really detailed, like these
Yes.
masks.
And
And
it was super fast. Like they figured out how to get them on within like a
5
few
minutes.
seconds.
Or-
Yeah. And she was like, the scary thing is at the end of it, she's like, if I'm able to talk to you about this and tell you about this, imagine what technology they have now.
Yeah.
Right. Well, some people think this was it right here. So some people think that the artwork at the CIA, or like during a certain time period, the artwork had code in it that they could communicate in through the
Yeah.
code in the art with other spies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it at all. So yeah, this is what we were talking about. So and these masks are so realistic, and so this is what the CIA was using for a very long time. And now, I mean, you know, there's all those like movies now that are out where someone has like nanotechnology and it like changes their face.
Yeah.
And I'm just like wondering if this is the kind of stuff that they actually
to.
have, you know?
Yeah, because they were
wouldn't doubt it.
bringing in Hollywood experts, and then they were figuring out how to do it way faster in the agency, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it that is really, really incredible. And yeah. It's just kind of sad how, and the other aspect is too, you know, when they were with the modern art, there's only so much. You have a very limited number of traditional paintings that, you know, a couple hundred years old. Like it's like you only have a certain amount, and most of them are museums, or they could be sold in like private auctions or things like that, right? So you can't. So the other option is like you can't have, or the other aspect is you can't have anything that's like super expensive that's new. So that's why the modern art, you know, it's like, okay, how can we make money on this? How else can we utilize this, you know? So that's why it was really important for them to bring in these names, to purchase, to have like really high, like expensive purchases of this art, to then all of a sudden push this in the center front, where then it's like anyone can now be a part of it. And then it's like everyone's now in a rush, like, well, I can paint this, I can paint that, you know? And then that's where it gets really sad. Like I know artists who are very incredible, like more traditional paint, like artwork that they create, but it's like, it takes them a long time to create it. I mean, it could take a month to make one really incredible painting, whereas like a modern artist could make 10 paintings in one day if they wanted to, you know, and just like take pictures of them and throw them up on Instagram and get like, you know, millions of followers all of a sudden. And, you know, the ones that really like the traditional paintings that I've talked with, or painters that I talked with, they're, you know, they're really discouraged by this. Like how, like, what do we do? You know, it's like, here's this like beautiful art that we're painting, but so, you know, it's also like society as well. I mean, it's how it's like trying to educate society and bring everybody back up to understand, like, hey, this modern art world is actually.
I mean,
being,
it's just
it's
like you said, it's like we said at the beginning, is it's an art of BS. Like
Yeah.
they'll like, I saw something last week where somebody had a bunch of buckets all stacked up. They were all filled with sand. He put a hole in one of the buckets. The sand started pouring out until the buckets fell somehow. Like he set it up that way, and the buckets fell, And then the artist is standing there and he goes like this, like, and then he starts getting applause. And I'm like,
wow,
bro, what did you just do? Like, that was,
that's
not art.
You actually reminded me of a story that I heard a long time ago from a friend of mine. She was like really in tune with like energy stuff like me. This was like a long time ago. And there was
here it is.
Oh, that's it.
Watch.
Try.
So the sand is pouring out somewhere, I think. And then like they're all just standing there.
Wow.
Now watch him. Thank you. Like what?
Okay.
That's your art, bro.
Probably
Okay.
costs like $100 just to watch that. Right? That's where all this goes. But yeah, so I had a friend years ago, this woman that I knew, and we were talking about art, actually, believe it or not. And she knew a family that had this artwork that was really like weird and demonic and kind of scary, and they hung it up in their house, and they had a baby, and it was in the baby's room. And she was telling them like, I feel really weird energy from this. I don't think it's good. And the baby died in the room. Yeah, I completely forgot about this. And like afterwards, they got rid of the painting, and it was like, it was like all these bad things started happening, like leading up to the baby dying, actually. And it was like there's one thing after another, and they refused to get rid of it because it was like they're for some reason they were deeply attached to this painting. Once the child died, they got rid of the painting, and it was like everything just changed for them. And it was like, and she felt really bad that she didn't tell them earlier, but she just felt like there was some kind of ghost that was on this thing, and it was really, really like doing something really bad. And actually, that was the first time I've ever even thought about how paintings and stuff could have energy in them. Like prior to that, I never even thought about it. It wasn't even a thought in my mind, and like I said, I loved like having Starry Night at my house and everything else. And then talking to her really made me think about things. And especially, like with you and I, like doing more meditation and everything, that really opened me up even more. But hearing that story so long ago, it was like 2003, maybe I heard that story. So it really, it really changes your perspective on all of this. So,
well, hey, how about we sorry, go ahead, Lindsay.
Oh, I was going to say, Ben, in your Top Curses in History series, the first episode, you had a cursed painting.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the crying boy. Oh, man. Yeah, the crying boy. That one, there's so many stories about this painting of the crying boy. And like people would get it and say like, oh, yeah, whatever. This is just like superstition. And like hang it in their house, and like all these bad things would happen until they got rid of it. So that was the other one, the crying boy. Supposedly it was like the ghost of the crying boy that was like in that painting. So yeah, so these are all on Rise TV, and these are all like cursed things that either cursed objects, cursed paintings, cursed dolls that I really got into. So crazy stuff.
Hopefully you got out of it too.
Oh yeah. Well, get into on the show, not really get into it.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
Well, hey, why don't we go over to rise.tv now? We'll continue this conversation, and then we'll get a bunch of questions from everybody on our chat over here on rise.tv. And if you're at home watching, if you'd like to support our work, please subscribe to rise.tv. Your subscription will help us keep making this content and create even more and more in-depth content with higher production and all of that. With your subscription, and we've got over 400 videos on there with all kinds of awesome stuff. And we're not stopping anytime soon. So please come on over to rise.tv, and we'll do our Q&A, and then we'll do our live meditation and prayer at the end of that. So do you have anything else to add, Ben?
No. We'll see you guys over on Rise TV, and I'll get into your questions right away.
All right. See you over there.
You've heard about cursed objects. You've heard about cursed places. What if the stories were real. King Tut's tomb, Macbeth, the Omen, the Hope Diamond. Curses have fascinated us throughout time. But what if there's more to it? Some legends are just too crazy to ignore. Join Ben Solo as he uncovers the creepy and the weirdest top curses in history. Maybe omens and jinxes aren't so superstitious after all.
Attention, attention! Have you ever heard of the rivalry between Coke and Pepsi? What if we told you the Cola Wars were just a big scam? Ever heard about a certain U.S. president helping popularize Pepsi in the USSR? Or how the Soviet Union paid the Pepsi company in warships? Why are candy and cola makers like Nestle, Coke, and Pepsi sponsoring health studies? Why do internal emails at Coca-Cola look like they've tried to influence the World Health Organization? Have you ever wondered why the obesity epidemic is getting worse even though we know sugar is bad for us?
Well, Edge of Wonder isn't a health show.
No, it is not.
And we already know we should be healthier. But what we found about the marketing manipulation behind our food products, that you were never supposed to know.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid about the sugar industry, people, pun intended. Ben and I are about to shock you by how little choice you really have in what you eat.
There's been a deliberate push for sugar on the world's citizens, and Rob and I are here to expose it. Today we'll uncover the smoking gun sugar marketing that just may reveal how our behavior has been conditioned for generations.
So join us as we dive into the truth about the big food agenda that's been building and building, and not just in your arteries. You won't believe what we found.
Get your questions ready because it's time for our live Q&A session exclusively on Rise.tv.